It's a good sign. All right, so thank you all for coming out to our December meeting. Today I have the honor of introducing Wayne Laubscher to present on Red Crossbills and their eruption that has happened the previous winter. So Wayne is the Clinton County compiler for the PA Birds publication and a member of the Lycoming Audubon Society board. He is a board member of the Pennsylvania Society for Ornithology, as well as a member of the North Central PA Conservancy Technical Committee. Wayne also coordinates the Audubon CBC, centered in the Lock Haven area, and is a native of the Lock Haven region, residing in Swissdale. Recently, prior to retirement, he worked for the Center County Planning Office as the Mosquito Disease County Control Coordinator for Center, Clinton, and Clearfield counties. So let's give a warm welcome to Wayne as he comes up here. And I will do some magic here. We have to, this part always confuses me. Share. See what that looks like on Zoom. It's not the right screen. Hang on a second. Present. Had this working earlier. Maybe that's open in a second. There we go. This all set up. All right.
Are we good?
There you are. Yes.
Okay. I might just use the keyboard.
That worked too.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. It's good to see some familiar faces here. Let's get started. I've been fascinated with red crossbills ever since I saw them probably at least 30 years ago in Clinton County. And since then, going up to Algonquin State Park, or Provincial Park, excuse me, and seeing them up there and thinking, wow, they look like a bunch of little miniature parrots. Well, normally that's a bird that's few and far between for this area unless you're willing to take a ride up to the Great White North and chase them. But last summer, there was a major eruption that resulted in numerous breeding records for the state. And the red crossbill complex, it's a very complicated species. There's a lot of information, a lot of different types and subspecies, and it's a little confusing. And so what I tried to do when I got fascinated with what was going on last year and into this year was try to consolidate, make some sense out of it, and demystify it, if you will, and try to make it understandable as to what's going on with this very interesting group of birds. Because it's not really one species per se. It is and it isn't, but we'll get into that as we come along here. So anyway, red crossbill, Latin name, Loxia curvirostra. And facts. There are many different types and subspecies that have been identified worldwide. Can you hear me, by the way? Okay. Can you? Up. How do we bring that up?
That can get you a mic.
Okay. Well, this is one.
Yes, that's going to Zoom.
Oh, to Zoom. Okay. So we'll get a handheld mic. All right. Can you hear me now? What's that? Oh, how's that? Okay, thank you. There are many different types and subspecies that have been identified worldwide, at least 25. They inhabit only the northern hemisphere. They have individually distinct flight calls and bill shapes, which are adapted to different conifer cone types. They possess stronger jaw muscles than white-winged crossbills, which allow them to forage over a wide range of conifers. They also feed on insects and tree buds in the spring. There's much size variation, by the way, amongst these types, anywhere from about 5.5 inches to 7.75 inches. They're found primarily in coniferous habitats, and they forage generally in flocks. They're nomadic and very eruptive, moving widely in response to varying annual cone crops region to region. Flocks and single birds may appear in residential areas, backyards, and feeders during eruptions. This is the Cornell Labs range map for North America, and they range across a wide area. Interestingly, as far north as southeastern Alaska and as far south as northwestern Nicaragua. In North America, the red crossbill complex comprises currently 12 different call types, which are distinguished in the field by their flight calls, many of which specialize on particular species of conifers. The call types are impossible to identify generally without recordings of their flight calls. Recordings can be made with a smartphone and sent to and identified to type by Matt Young at the Finch Network. Type 9, the South Hills crossbill, was elevated to a separate species in 2017, now known as the Cassia crossbill. The species is restricted only to a small area in Cassia County in southern Idaho. They feed exclusively on lodgepole pines because they have thicker bills evolved for the pine's thick scale cones, which are difficult to open. Other red crossbill types can't open them. Cassias do not interbreed with other red crossbill types. The lack of squirrels in the area as competitive foragers and of agents of seed dispersal also benefits them, but at the same time contributes to restricting their range. And for those of you who have inquiring minds that want to know, 2 Eurasian types have been elevated to species. The Scottish crossbill, formerly Eurasian type 3Cs, endemic to the Caledonian forests of Scotland, and here's some trivia for you, the only terrestrial vertebrate endemic to the United Kingdom. The parrot crossbill, formerly Eurasian type 2D, its range is northwestern Europe to western Russia, with a small population in Scotland where it is difficult to distinguish from the Scottish crossbill. Male red crossbills are a dull red or orange with dark wings and dark tails. Females are a dull green or greenish yellow, also with dark wings and dark tails. Conservation status worldwide is considered stable and not considered threatened. However, in North America, they were formerly stable, but currently showing a slight decline. Probable factors for this include habitat loss, which includes logging, forest fires, mining, and roadways. Also vehicle collisions, pine beetle outbreaks, and red squirrels. In Pennsylvania, the red crossbill is a species of greatest conservation need. Red crossbills eat seed of spruce, pine, Douglas fir, hemlock, or larch. And thank you, Ron Crandall, for this photo, which I believe came from 2021 at Scotia Barrens during that May incursion of them. I also saw them feeding on hemlock at R.B. Winter State Park. They insert the partly open bill between two of the cone scales. Then they close the bill, which widens the space between the scales. This exposes the seed. They then use the tongue and the bill together to remove the seed. The excellent bumper white pine crop in the Northeast resulted in a record red crossbill eruption from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. Crossbill types in the Northeast eruption included the Appalachian crossbill type 1, which concentrates on pine and spruce, the Rocky Mountain, Sierra, and Bendire's crossbills type 2, pine species and probably a general diet, the Western hemlock type 3, hemlock, firs, and spruces, Douglas fir crossbill type 4, Douglas fir, and apparently also other pine species, the old northeastern red crossbill type 12, all conifers. They are a low density, high diversity specialist. Type 1 of Appalachian crossbill, the core occurrence zone. This is a core area where crossbills are found in most years eating key conifers and breeding. This is dark brown area. Secondary occurrence zone, light brown. The crossbill is present in less numbers most years, and small numbers breed in this area. Primary eruption zone, dark blue. Crossbills flee to these areas when key conifers in their core zone fail. They may stay and nest, rarely in small numbers. The secondary eruption zone, light blue. Crossbills flee to these areas when key conifers in their core zone and primary eruption zone experience widespread failure of many conifers. The Appalachian crossbill is a medium build and feeds on eastern white, pitch, red, Virginia, and loblolly pines, as well as red spruce. And courtesy of Matt Young at the Finch Research Network, he kindly provided me with the call.
Catalog number 139455.
That's the type 1. Type 12. In the 19th century, there was a fairly common red crossbill population in the northeastern United States and eastern Canada, known as the old medium-billed northeastern crossbill. This population became very rare when widespread logging cleared nearly all the conifers in the Northeast. It was believed that this type was still around and seems to have been confirmed by research. The restoration of conifers and maturation of native forests may be the reason for the type 12 rebounding. And this is their zone. Core zone, core occurrence zone, dark red, secondary occurrence zone, light red, primary eruption zone, dark blue, and secondary eruption zone, light blue. And as you can see, in the secondary zone, they've pretty much gone all over the United States as part of Canada. The old northeastern red crossbill feeds on eastern white, red, jack, pitch, and Japanese black pines. Also red, white, blue, and Norway spruces, as well as eastern hemlock and tamarack. There are records of them in New York and Pennsylvania nesting in Norway spruces. It is the most recent call type to be described. And this is an interesting graph showing the 2023-24 conifer usage of type 12. If you look at the the right-hand side from July through December, that corresponds to 2023, where you can see that most of the feeding was on white pines. If you look at the left side, January to June, you can see that the amount of white pines that were being fed on by the red crossbills begins to diminish. And by the time you reach June, they're only feeding on tamarack and red pine. Dr. Porter says the erupting crossbills and the local type 12 crossbills took advantage of this historical white pine cone crop. From July through March, crossbills in the Northeast ate little other than white pine. Once April hit, there was an expansion of the crossbill's dietary niche to include other conifers, especially red and pitch pine. This presumably coincided with white pine shedding many of its seeds, forcing birds to switch to feeding on conifers that hold on to their seeds inside of cones for longer. And red crossbills frequently gather grit and salt for calcium on the roads. Calcium is also obtained from clay. Foraging on roads too often results, unfortunately, in dire consequences. Frequent vehicle collisions, which is a likely contributing factor to their decline. This flock was at the Mountaintop Restaurant at the intersection of routes 44 and 664 in the Clinton-Lycoming line. And from February through March, a flock that started out at about 25 birds slowly seemed to diminish either through dispersal or road kills till about 8 or 10 the last day or so that I saw them there. I personally picked up probably 5 carcasses, and I know that more were killed. And this is not the way I would prefer to get a close-up of the bill. Red crossbills have nested in Pennsylvania and can nest over several months of a year if adequate food is available. This photo and the next one I took in May of 2021 when several showed up at Scotia Barrens. And I guess my question is, does anyone know if they nested that year in that area? Although there have only been at least a few red crossbills in Pennsylvania, eruptions of them were reported starting in July of 2023. They have been confirmed as having nested in Pennsylvania. Types 1, 2, 3, 4, and 12 fed on primarily white pine cones until the crop was exhausted. They nested well into spring. In North America, red crossbills nest in 2 periods during a year based on cone availability. The first period is July to September in response to new cone crops. And the second period is January to April in response to the previous year's cone crops. However, worldwide, they have been known to nest in every month of the year. And I'll just mention the other crossbill, the white-winged crossbill, Loxia leucoptera. White-winged crossbills nest between July and October, but they also have been known to nest every month of the year worldwide. This was part of a flock that had showed up in Williamsport back in December of 2009 at the Williamsport High School, and they were feeding on the ornamental Douglas fir cones that were planted in front of the school. And this is what they generally feed on, cones, the smaller cones of spruces and firs. They've also been known to feed on white pine cones. Well, when March rolled around, there were only about half a dozen female white-winged crossbills at the property, having pretty much decimated what was left of the Douglas fir cones. However, I watched them feed on fallen white pine cones. I never saw them on the white pines themselves with the cones still on the tree, but they were feeding on the fallen cones. They've yet to be confirmed as nesting in Pennsylvania. However, juveniles were found in Clinton County in November and December of 2012. They were feeding on white spruce. And this is my very first digital video that I ever took back in 2010 with my little point and shoot 5 feet away from 6 female crossbills ignoring me on these white pine cones. So I thought I'd play that, and then I'm going to play it again at half speed to see if you can pick out any kind of foraging behavior with them. I think maybe I need to go back. Here we go. There we go. That's normal speed. I apologize for the quality, but as I said, that was from 2010. And these birds literally ignored me. Okay, and this is at half speed. Breeding of red crossbills is historically known from Bradford, Clearfield, Clinton, forests like Cumming, McCain, Monroe, Pike, Potter, Somerset, Union, Wyoming counties, and recently Center County. There have been at least 38 breeding records in Pennsylvania in the past 32 years. So this past one started out around July and August. First glimpses that I found out about were at the Haneyville campground in Lycoming County along Route 664. Bobby Brown got some photos at the campground in July and August of several birds. The ground at the campground was 100% covered with white pine cones. You couldn't walk without stepping on them. That's how many cones were there. A family group consisting of 2 adults and 1 fledgling was observed coming to a feeder at a residence near Eastville in Clinton County in August of 23. Sightings continued throughout the region to at least early 2024. So in mid-January, we heard about our first nest at RB Winter State Park in Union County, right over Pavilion number 1 along the main trail on the north end of the park. Found by Jesse Sauter. And the nest is not easy to see. The nests are built from conifer twigs lined with needles, lichen, grass, bark, feathers, hair, or any other available material. General size is about 9 inches by 2 inches. The male and female select the nest site together, and the female does the building. The male sometimes helps. This was determined to be a pair that were of call type 4, which is a Western type. And I think it might have been the first call type 4 that was documented as nesting in Pennsylvania. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I believe I heard. And this is what brought them in, lots and lots of white pine cones. But I did see them feeding on hemlock there also. And here's the male doing a food delivery, coming in. The young are fed a slurry of conifer seeds. And when the eggs hatch out, both adults will tend to the feeding. After this particular feeding, the male flew up above the nest, sat there for 30 seconds or so, and took off again for another food run. And they had, again, no fear of people. We were just yards away from them shooting pictures. They were ignoring us, drinking water out of the puddle. And interesting, when they forage for grit and salt, and when they drink, they'll turn their head sideways because of the anatomy of their bill. And I also saw them feeding, as I said, in hemlock with siskins, by the way. Siskins on the top and the red crossbill on the bottom. Coudersport Pike, Route 664 and 44, Clinton and Lycoming counties, February to March of 2024. This was the flock that I mentioned, started out at about 25, was coming in daily for weeks to the parking lot and to the road. Call types 1, 2, 4, and 12 are recorded in this flock. This information was provided by Bobby Brown's recordings. And I saw them feeding and roosting in Norway spruce at that site. Red crossbills have been reported in this area since at least December of 23 and were likely present much earlier. This area is very close to the Haneyville campground. Few birds appear to retain evidence of fledgling plumage streaking. Now I'll play a video. It's a little jumpy, but it settles down a little bit. And I tried to chase them off the road sometimes when the cars were approaching, and the birds just literally ignored me. I had to get out of the way of the cars. And they would sometimes miss the cars only by 18, 20 inches. I didn't see any mortality when I was there, but I know probably at least I'm aware of 8 or 10 birds over the period of a couple of weeks that were killed there, probably more. They literally have no fear of people. Meanwhile, Cranberry Swamp, Clinton County, February and March 2024. Brian Schmoke was following up on some December reports. And lo and behold, he found a nest. An active nest was found in open woodlands, where they generally nest in an open woodland scenario. So Brian was kind enough to take me out there on a couple of visits. And we saw feeding activity while we were there. Clutch size is about 2 to 6 eggs. Interestingly, the incubation is 12 to 15 days and fledging is 18 to 20 days. In other words, they're out of the nest and on the wing in less than 3 weeks. And we saw both parents feeding these young. We weren't sure how many young were in the nest. We would see a head or a beak every once in a while. It was determined that these were call type 2, another Western type. Now, if you look very closely, there is a bill down there ready to collect some food. You have to look closely, but they're there. I was on one side of the nest shooting these images, and Brian was on the other side shooting his images, and these are his images from the other side. And some little downy or feathered heads. This is an interesting map that Chad Kaufman and Katie Anderson put together and gave me permission to use. They compiled this during the winter of 2020, 23-24, and these were the counties that winter that were reporting crossbills. Later on in the spring, in April of 24, red crossbills were listed on the 3rd PA Bird Atlas as territorial near Black Shannon State Park in Center County. They had been at that location for several months. Also in April of 24, a juvenile was observed with an adult female at Cinnamahoning State Park in Potter County. Continuing April and early May, sightings at Leonard Harrison State Park in Tioga County and State Game Lands 176, Scotia Barrens, and Center. In early May, 2 juveniles were seen being fed by adults in Pike County. And this is a photo of what a juvenile red crossbill looks like. They are heavily streaked. Someone compared them to a pine siskin with a deformed bill. These are images that were taken in May of this year at Game Lands 176 by Jeff Catton, and thank you, Jeff. And he got a nice image of some juveniles. The 3rd PA Bird Atlas eBird records for 2024, 8 confirmed reading records, and that doesn't even count the possible and the probables. And they were January through early February of 24, numerous reports of a nest at RB Winter State Park in Union County. February of 24, nesting in Cranberry Swamp, Clinton County. February 6, 24, 1 report of carrying nest material at Leonard Harrison State Park in Tioga County. May 4th, 24, 1 report of a feeding young at the lodge at Woodlock in Pike County. May 7th and 19th, reports of recently fledged young at Scotia Baron, Center County. May 16th, reports of recently fledged young and feeding young at Cinemahoning State Park in Potter County. July 30th, reports of recently fledged young and feeding young in Quijano Wild Area, Elk State Forest, Cameron County. And August 10th, 24, one report of recently fledged young in the Spruce Flats Bog Area of the Forbes State Forest in Westmoreland County. So when we add these extra counties in, we get, from what I've been able to ascertain, 37 counties that have reported red crossbills between 2023 and 2024. And to add to Chad and Katie's map, those counties. Since the summer of 24, it seems that most of the individuals of type 2 and 4, which are Western types, have moved back out west. Type 12 currently remains in the Northeast. There was a report a couple of weeks ago from Wayne County, and I believe the recording typed them out as a type 12. A few holdover individuals of type 2 and 4 are still in the Northeast. Also, a small number of type 1s are in the region as well. And if you want to see really nice video that's not very long and very informative, go to the Sac-Sim Bog website to the virtually live video series. And this is from March of this year. The second half of the video is a really nice dissertation and footage of red crossbills and white-winged crossbills with Matt Young. And thank you. I hope I didn't confuse you too much, and if you have any questions, I'll try to take them. Nick, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so I had 7 observations off. And so I was reading about it in a tree, August. So I was all excited about finding them. But what I think I never did find them. But they were moving around in small groups. They were feeding on. And what I concluded most likely was that they were starting to head back. They were feeding in anticipation of the.
Were you able to ascertain any call types?
Subsequently,
I heard about that family group the other day near Shavers Creek. 2 adults and a juvenile that were seen by Margaret and someone else. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, hopefully I didn't confuse you too much. Yes, sir. Yes, the Finch Research Network. It's all finches, even some out of the country, including some of the Hawaiian honey creepers are included in that research project. They're also doing a lot of work with evening grosbeaks.
Doug, when you mentioned birds coming from the west,
Yes.
is in the records of the nesting crossbills in Pennsylvania, is that typical? Or people just don't know?
Well, I think part of it is it's not normally typical, but I think it's just in recent years they've been paying attention to these call types. But that RB Winter nest was supposedly the first record of a type 4. But, you know, it may be in past eruptions they've come over this far. It depends on how bad the cone crops are out in the Western North America versus how good they are in Eastern North America. And apparently last year we just had a massive amount of white pine cones. Yeah. That's a good question. I found out that supposedly, now I have to confirm this, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. Supposedly with red crossbills, it's about 50-50 which way the mandibles cross. However, I was told with white-winged crossbills, there's very little variation. But that's a good question. Gary.
You mentioned that red squirrels thought maybe to be the population limit. Is that nest predation?
It might be, but I think it's also competitive foraging, probably a little of both. As we know, red squirrels can be rather predaceous on other animals.
We've got a couple questions on Zoom here. This first one's a two-parter. Are they seen most years in Center County? And if so, what types are typically seen in Center County?
I'm not sure what the frequency in Center County is. I know that the last time prior to this eruption, there was a small flock showing up at Scotia Barrens in May of 2021. I don't know how frequently they're seen. I think the type 1s and the type 12s, according to information, particularly from the Finch Research Network, there's always some of those around. In off years, they're in very, very small numbers, and it's very difficult for people to, run into them because most of the time they're in contiguous coniferous forests.
A couple more here. Do you know the kind of the best place in Center that they tend to be around for people to go see or be around?
Well, during the eruption, as I understand, of course, later in the eruption, Scotia Barrens, they were reported at Black Moshannon State Park for a while, and they were reported at the Mid-State Airport for a while. Now, I think, does anyone know of any other areas in the county where they were being seen on a semi-regular basis?
About regular, I just have them at Penn Roosevelt State Park.
Yeah. Joe?
They were on the Pine Swamp Road, Full Mountain, near Blue Valley State Park for several years.
During the eruption, I also had them repeatedly on Greens Valley Road near Center Hall.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's all like contiguous forest, isn't it? Yeah. Someone over here? Gary?
Found a spot once, little flat, I think, up at the flat tower.
Yeah.
Up on the mountain.
Could you tell what they were feeding on?
They were on spruce up there.
Was it later in the year or the spring? They tend to go for the smaller cones later on, it seems. Anyone else?
We have another question here.
Okay.
Do you know if there are any kind of molecular studies being done to analyze the different call types if they're also genetically different?
Other than the one species that was elevated to full species, the Cassia crossbill, I'm not sure what molecular work has been done. A lot of it's sometimes based on simply the call type and what restrictive food that they're using for cones. But I know, like I said, the Cassia crossbill, they've confirmed that it does not interbreed at all. It does not leave that area. And it's morphologically distinct because it's able to open those cones up, the lodgepole cones up that the other crossbills cannot open. So apparently that was criteria for species. Anyone else? Yes, Doug.
Do you think with climate disruption that the southern population in the Appalachians are at risk if we lose those conifers at the high elevations because they're under stress because of increased temperature?
Probably they'll probably have to move elsewhere for their food during eruptions if those trees go away. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Like you're talking about the same red crossbill, but they have different calls.
Yeah, that's a little hard to wrap your head around, but they're all red crossbill with different call types, yes. And if you go on the Finch Research Network, they explain that in great detail. I'm just basically skimming the surface of it to give you a general overview, but you should check out that website because they cover all the finches, not just crossbills, but evening grosbeaks and other finches. Yes, Joe.
I would shout out the new, Finch field guide that, Matt Young and William Stokes of the Stokes Guide.
Thank you. Yes, it just came out
They have a great section.
back here.
Slide up there. December 31st.
Well, maybe your report was one of the ones that Brian was following up on. Yeah. Well, we came down Cransbury Swamp Road, you know where that cabin is? And we walked from that cabin on that side of the swamp for probably just a few hundred yards. And then we had to go down to where the water drains out to get over the wet area and came around that side. No, I'm not sure about that. Okay.
That fence, we counted all pines on one side. They bounced around there. If we were out of cell service, we weren't exactly sure what they were. And we reported them, about where we had cell service and then part of it was go back.
What type were they? Yeah, that was the nest that Brian said was the type. How many do you figure you saw? Yeah. When I was down there with him, that was probably the most we saw at any one time, not counting the nest and the pair at the nest. Thank you. Anyone else?
We've got another Zoom question here.
Okay.
Do we know if the calls are innate or if they're learned? And do we see kind of a gradient of song types in neighboring types?
That's a good question. I haven't seen anything specific to that question, but I would refer you to the Finch Research Network. You can always send them a query or question. Matt Young's pretty good about that. He had no hesitation to send me those 2 audio files. I haven't met him yet, but if you watch the video, the Saxon video, you can get an idea of how really knowledgeable he is. He's been studying these things for years and years. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
All right. So thank you all again for coming out to the December Bird Club meeting. We will be back here next month in January 22nd. Ryan Hamilton from Clearwater Conservancy will be here to talk about some of the work that he does and the effects that it can have on the bird lands that we all might be familiar with and bird quite often. So excited to hear about that and maybe some of the behind the scenes from their easements point of view. So yeah, thank you all. Safe travels as you're heading out. Have happy holidays and look forward to reconnecting in the new year with you all.
Well, that worked out well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.